Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast is proudly sponsored by New Vision.
My team, kinda power. I love the power. I love the power.
Hi guys, and welcome to the Big Footy Port Adelaide podcast, a show about all things Port Adelaide Footy Club. I'm your host, as always, Macca 19, and joining me as co-host, we got Fishing Rick. How are you, mate?
Macca, bloody good. What about you?
Yeah, that's the way. Not too bad. Yeah, going
Good
pretty
work.
well. Bit of podcast
Yes.
withdrawals. Back to 1 a week.
With you. Yeah, well, I guess it gives us a bit more life again, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
No
Absolutely.
footy to watch on the weekends anymore.
Very sad. Very sad.
It is sad.
And back on the podcast, we've got RossFC.
How you going?
Good, mate. Good. Great to have you back on.
Thanks, and I agree with Rick. It is. I do miss watching the footy. Hopefully, we can hurry up with this trade period and get to round one.
That's it. I do love off-season just as much as the footy itself. I love trades. I love the draft. All that sort of stuff. I think it's fantastic.
Yep.
Yeah, I just find it a bit repetitive though. It just seems it goes for so long, but nothing really happens, and
It's all deadline-led stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
Just shorten it and it'll be fine.
but it's good media for the AFL, so I can see why they do it.
Yep.
Definitely.
All right. Well, I guess the main news topic before we get on to the player reviews this week is that our pesky next-door neighbour took a bit of a fancy to one of our coaches and decided to make him senior coach. Phil Walsh, our midfield manager, is going to coach the Crows for the next 3 years. How do we feel about that one?
Yeah, it's disappointing, obviously, because he had to end up where he ended up. It would have been better if he ended up coaching someone else. But I will say, though, that I don't know much about what he did at Port Adelaide. All I know is I've heard that he was the reason we were kicking it towards the pockets, and that's about it.
I must admit, I'm not too fussed where he's gone. That doesn't really bother me, to be honest. I mean, I guess the only thing that bothers me slightly is, you sort of leak a little bit of intellectual property. So, retaining staff, it does, you lose a little bit. But at the same time, as was pointed out by our executives, that, it's also good business. It means we're doing something right. And Mackie pointed out some good figures on what's flowed through our system, which I'll let you highlight in a sec. So, I think in a way that's good. And the other opportunity is we get more fresh ideas in and another person into the system, which might bring something new, and we might get a more invigorated person of Walsh's calibre, but we just don't know it yet. So it's always new beginnings and more opportunities.
Yeah, definitely
That's
a new
right.
dimension to our game
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think, as Kane Corn said on the radio yesterday, and he also reiterated the same point today, was that in terms of the intellectual property, everyone knows what everyone else is doing anyway. It's just a matter of who does it better. So I'm not sure we're going to lose too much. I guess it depends on, if there's a certain player that really liked Phil Walsh and, he might try and poach that player or other staff members, that sort of thing, which we might find out, I guess, a little bit later down the track. But I guess for me, there's two real positives to take out of it. I'm taking the positive view, and as you've already said, we will get another experienced set of eyes and a voice over our midfield group next year. They've learned from Richo, they've learned from Walsh, they've still got Josh Carr as their midfield coach. Now they're going to get another experienced coach, which will be great for their development, I think. And as you said, Rick, if you take away the annoyance factor, it's actually a really bloody good thing that we are known as a development club. This is our 5th assistant coach in 10 years that's become a senior coach directly from Port Adelaide. We've also had 2 heads of recruiting and 2 heads of fitness have been poached by other clubs. That's not including other people like Adam Kingsley and Chris Pelchin, who also got new roles at different clubs as well. I think it's a fantastic positive that we can develop our people into great football people who are sought after, for promotion across the league. It is annoying. It's a bit frustrating to lose that talent. But the fact that we are able to develop that talent, I think, is a wonderful thing. And I'd much rather be known as a club able to develop people into wonderful assets than a club that has third-rate assistants and staff that no one else wants.
Definitely.
Would have to be almost the highest performing club in that regard, I would imagine, wouldn't we? I mean, converting assistant coaches into senior AFL coaches would have to be pretty close anyway.
Oh, I think we're definitely number one at the moment. Hawthorn has had Hardwick, Cameron, and one other that doesn't come to mind straight away. They've had 3. Sydney have had Lyon and Longmire, and obviously there's Dew knocking on the door of another job as well. So, we're certainly up there.
I think for me also, it's important more so for us to retain our key pillars, which would be Burgess, Hinkley and Thomas. They would be a lot more difficult to replace, and they're obviously the main men in relation to the bulk of our processes and intellectual property. So, you could probably cover these sort of losses a lot easier. As we saw post-2004, even the loss of Brian Cunningham was a big difference to the operational side of our football club as a whole. So that's where it becomes more of a challenge. And I guess the other aspect, if we look at it objectively as well, is that for everything that Phil Walsh knows about us, we also will be able to take that away and know his philosophies of coaching in a senior position at a rival club. So it goes both ways, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, also with Burgess, I'm hoping with that academy that he's starting up, or is it already started up?
I think he started it up, yeah.
Well, hopefully with that he can develop people where they can take people from there instead of taking the real thing, and we can just keep him.
Well, that's the thing.
He's got first-rate knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, Walsh is going to be a loss. There's no doubt about that. His game day nous, his tactical nous is as good as it gets. So I guess the question is, how much exactly will we miss him, and what sort of people should we be looking at to replace him?
Well, hopefully the replacement can mix it up a little bit, and we don't have to lose that much in terms of tactical analysis and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, would he have been in charge of our centre clearances, Macca?
Well, I don't know. I guess you've got to work out what sort of roles he had and what sort of roles Josh Carr has had in that midfield group, because Josh Carr is listed as the midfield coach and Walsh was our midfield manager. So I guess it really depends on that sort of thing. I think if we're looking for a like-for-like replacement for Phil Walsh's particular role, I think we need to be looking at someone that has got that previous experience at AFL level. So I think we should be looking at someone like Scott Waters, someone like Mark Neild, who were both outstanding assistant coaches at Collingwood, or maybe even someone like Gary Ayres.
Even speaking on Collingwood, Robert Harvey was assistant coach of the year 2 years ago as well, I think.
Yeah, I think he's their senior assistant.
Tribu will be all excited with Gary Ayres being mentioned.
I had a quick chat to him about that before. He's well keen, I think.
He won. He was coaching Port Melbourne, and he won a couple of flags with them a couple of years ago, didn't he?
Yeah, I think his record actually stands up pretty well. I mean, he coached Geelong to a grand final and 3 final series in 5 years. He coached the Crows to a prelim. Probably unlucky not to make the grand final that year because of injuries. And 3 final series in 4.5 years. And then he took over Port Melbourne and has made 2 grand finals and went undefeated on the way to a premiership with a club in the VFL, which is a standalone club. They didn't have any AFL influence in that club. So I think his record actually stands up pretty well.
Definitely. Even if we do even upgrade Buddha Hocking, like he'd be a suitable replacement either as a midfield coach or as a SANFL coach.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yep.
I was actually thinking something similar, but I was actually thinking what with all the hype around Matthew Nixon, the fantastic job that he's doing, maybe giving him sort of a job promotion internally within the coaching group to sort of fill that void if he's as good as what the rumours are, and maybe look at someone trying to fill in his job role in the defensive.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe like Ben Hart or Kingsley or something like that. I think they're defensive coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
You
that's right.
You could always look at someone like Aaron Greaves, who's already in our system as well.
He's the development coach, and he's like a part-time right coach as well, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that way we're sort of promoting within and developing within and then getting and I'm just picking a random name here. I think you brought it up earlier, Macca, on the forum, like Drew Bolton. Get Drew Bolton in and start him as a line coach, and and then have a healthy progression along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the capabilities and the skills of all these guys, obviously. So, but that would also seem like a confident move of the club if they went down that path as well.
Yeah. Another one that I wouldn't be that I wouldn't mind doing would maybe be Nick Maxwell and make him our defensive line coach or an assistant line coach.
Yeah, that's a decent idea. Just needs to get a couple of years' experience somewhere and maybe pick him up, I'd say, in a couple of years' time.
Yep.
Is he in the market, though, or is he in the media?
I'm not too sure. He might be going down the media path. He's done a lot
I think
of
I saw him on Channel 7.
Yeah.
So that would be the big challenge, but I'm sure we'll find there's plenty of retired places. I mean, you've even players. You got old Dom. Maybe he's interested, but you never know.
You never know. That's
so
right.
what did you guys? I'm sure it's been seen. David Koch's comments this morning. Is it just a bit of tongue in cheek, shooting one across the bow of the rivals, talking about us wanting to replicate Hawthorn and Geelong and the Crows wanting to replicate Port Adelaide, or did you think maybe he let his guard down a little bit there and maybe wasn't as classy for one of his rare occasions?
I actually think there was not much in it. Like, he was simply saying that Walsh departed the club, and the people around him, I'm not sure what their names are, but they were pretty much spurring him on to say, did he have the coaching role at the Crows, and obviously was forced to admit it because he's on TV, doesn't want to say no or anything. But yeah, he was just simply saying that Walsh was departing the club.
Yeah, I don't know. It was probably something that didn't really need to be said, but in the end, it's a little bit of a cheap shot, but everyone will move on, won't they?
Yeah, they'll get over it.
I'm sure it would have got Double A outraged.
Oh, apparently it did. Yeah, no doubt.
It's a little bit of trolling by Koshy, I reckon, but
that's it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we've done the right things if we're becoming a club that people want to follow. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Well, look, let's leave that there for now. It's a bit disappointing, but we'll all move on. We'll talk about the best and fairest, which Robbie Gray won by a record margin. He scored 398 votes. He was the runaway winner. Travis Boak finished second. Kane Corns finished in the top three again for about the 50 millionth year in a row. Was there any real surprises with the leaderboard or anything like that?
Well, definitely not Kane Corns. He was not a surprise. I knew he'd be top three.
Yep.
And Matthew Lobe won the Coaches Award, which is really deserves something for the work we put him through with no backup whatsoever. I think we had one game. He had one game off with. We had Renouf come in as the carbon rod, and then that's about it. That's the only help we got.
I thought all the awards were on the money. Ollie Wines, best under 21 player. I mean, you couldn't argue with that. Brad Ebert in the community, he's the face of Port Adelaide, bleeds for the club, and Travis Boak winning he won. Lobe, Robbie Gray, I think. Yeah, they all tick all the boxes. So, and I mean, you knew that Robbie Gray was going to win after what Ken was saying before the Brownlow.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt he was going to win, and very well deserves his victory. He had an absolutely stunning season. I guess the surprises for me were the lack of defenders in the top 10 in the leaderboard. Jonas was the only defensive player in there. He snuck in 10th spot. Jackie Homsch finished 12th. I thought it was a little bit low. And Jackson Trengo finished 18th. I thought, even though he missed a few games, I thought he'd be pushing the top 10 as well. And I guess Chatty Wingard in 9th spot. I thought he had a pretty good year, but I think some people maybe saw that as a bit of a surprise as well.
Yeah, with obviously it's probably a midfielder's award or something, but with Trango, you could make the case that because of his injury, it might have pushed him down a couple of spots. And Jack Homch, I think, should have been top 10. He was great all year, especially this season. His improvement has been out of this world.
Well, let's talk about some trades. We spoke at length about Paddy Ryder last week, but there's another player that's requested a trade to Port Adelaide, which is Daniel Gorringe from Gold Coast. He's 22 years old. He's played 20 games. We've spoken about that we need to improve our ruck depth, and I think he would be a pretty good shot at doing that.
From where he is at his stage of his career, I think he'd be thinking any AFL or SANFL, and definitely the SANFL for him is the better option. Him and Redden, if fit, Redden can be a good duo at SANFL level. I'd say Gorringe would be a forward ruck, pinch hitting, I'd say, at that time, and it'd be very good for him.
Wouldn't it? We spoke about Gorringe last year, and we sort of decided that it wasn't really worth chasing. But if you look at his stats and the games that he's played for his age, he is actually pretty comparable to most other rucks in the league at that same age. I mean, you look at Matthew Lobey, he'd only played 3 games, 3 pretty unimpressive games, and was struggling at SANFL level at the same age. He's also very comparable to guys like Sam Jacobs, Hamish McIntosh, Todd Goldstein, Warnock, Marich Hale. It does take time for these ruckmen to develop.
I do see, though, that in the immediate future that he'll be more of a forward than a ruckman.
Yep.
But in maybe 2-3 years' time, he'd be having long stints in the ruck like Mitch Harvey has had this season.
I think the thing I like about Gorringe as well is the fact that he has played considerable football at centre half back in the NEAFL up north, which is pretty similar to Ryder and obviously Trengove as well. So if he did end up coming to us, it adds another string to our bow in terms of flexibility.
Yeah, sometimes I feel sorry for Tom Cleary down back
for him.
Lack of help.
So what about Paddy Ryder, Macca? I've been a bit out of action with the footy news a little bit. Have you been following the Paddy Ryder situation at all?
A little bit. I mean, it's stalled a little bit, I guess. I mean, Essendon are well within their right to expect maybe a player in return, and we're well within our right to say get stuff. So, I guess it's a little bit of a stalemate at the moment. I mean, they're expecting someone like Hamish Hartlett, which is just ridiculous, as well as our first round pick. So, I don't know. I still think we'll be able to get it done for just our first round pick. I think the AFL might be able to sort of request that these sort of things go through so that things don't end up at court and it gets really messy.
I'm hoping that they're bluffing in this situation because I've heard that they're also trying to get Giles, which might go to the last minute. So hopefully early in the last day that we can get this deal done and then they can move on to their Giles trade.
Mm. I mean, it's just trade week. I mean, it's all bluster anyway. I mean, you make a suggestion and the other club says, nah, that's rubbish. And they make a suggestion, nah, that's too much. And you just sort of whittle it down. And, in 6 or 7 days' time, the trade will get done anyway.
We seem to be caught up with being the club, though, that gets tied into these lengthy trade negotiations, which then seems to stall the rest of our trade week. It would be nice just to have a fluid process once in a while where it's just a nice, agreeable trade early on, which then allows us to focus on potential other trades. But, I mean, I didn't like the Essendon's list manager's explanation of, he finished 7th in our best and fairest, so we'll take your 7th in your best and fairest. I mean, what sort of childish rubbish are we talking about here? How's that any analogy on how to do a trade?
Yeah.
Sounds like a guy that doesn't even want to do a trade at all, in my opinion.
Yeah. I wouldn't surprise me if it goes to the last minute. This one, I think Essendon will sort of hold off, and they're known for being sort of pricks at the trade table. And as mentioned on radio yesterday, I think there's quite a few clubs that just outright refuse to deal with Essendon anymore.
Yeah, I've heard from Terry Wallace that Adelaide and Essendon are the worst teams to deal with, apparently.
Mm.
Did you see the dagger in the dual Port Adelaide Football Club supporters where Levi Greenwood has requested to be traded to Collingwood.
Disappointing.
Oh, wow.
Disappointing. I really like Greenwood, and I would have loved him to have come home, but I guess we're probably not really interested in his type of player, but I think he'll do well at Collingwood.
I was hoping he'd stay for another year, and then maybe the next year we could pick him up, but I doubt it's going to happen now.
No.
Well, didn't he finish second in their best and fairest?
Equal second. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean,
so Collingwood have offered him a 4-year deal for $450,000 a year, I think. So it's quite a big deal for Greenwood. You can't say no to that.
Apparently, North Melbourne's coach doesn't actually rate him as highly as Collingwood do, which he got an offer that was below Collingwood as well. So.
Yep.
I mean, to me, I think if we were to pursue him, he would really be taking Kane Corns' spot in the side, I would imagine.
Yeah, I reckon we can groom Calhoun for that anyway.
Yeah. Well, Corns
I'm pretty happy if we just go for Ryder and Gorringe this trade period, and I don't know what that means for Luke Loudon. There was a lot of talk that we were very interested in him, so I don't know if that's been put on the back burner because of Gorringe.
If we throw in our second rounder somehow in the deal for Ryder, which probably won't get us Gorringe anymore, then I think that third rounder for Loudon could happen, but yeah, only if something wrong happens in this whole trade period, then we'll probably get him.
Look, for all the love and lore of Pat Ryder, I'm not willing to throw the kitchen sink out for him, and I think our first round pick is fair because until this season just finished, he wasn't that great, and he's had a reasonable season. Wasn't spectacular if you look at his BnF result, and who knows what he's going to deliver next year. I mean, we don't have a huge form line to go by of consistency that he's going to be, the panacea to all our problems. So it's, I just don't want to overcommit, and, I don't want to spoil our midfield depth either. I know as a footy club we've always got to be improving, but we've still got a young midfield, but a performing midfield. So I don't see the reason why we need to look at even disbanding or disjoining that. It's growing organically well enough. So, and there's plenty of options out there for us. So, if Ryder's not the one, well, then he's not the one. And then we move on to the next potential player.
I know the negotiators on our club, the list managers and stuff, they're trying to be nice by doing an ethical trade. But, I think if the roles were reversed and Essendon were put in the situation we're in, I think they probably would have screwed us over and Ryder would have gone out of his contract already.
Yep. We got the power to win, power to roll, come on, for Adelaide aggression, we are the power from Port.
Alright, well let's talk about the main reason for these review podcasts now at the end of the season, which is we'll start our player reviews this week. We're going to do it in alphabetical order. So obviously we start with Brendan AhChee, who's a 20-year-old. It was his third season on the list for Port Adelaide. He's yet to debut at AFL level. He played 19 games in the SANFL this year for 11 goals, averaged around about 15 disposals a game. He's a half forward that pushes through the midfield. How do we see his season this year?
I think his best position, in my opinion, is at half forward. I've heard him in the past say that he wants to try and be like Ollie Wines and stay in the inside midfield, in the inside midfield role. I will say, though, that his first half of the year, I will admit that I wanted him out, and he has completely proven me wrong. And it's just so great how his second half of the year has been. I think Buddha Hocking laid down the gauntlet halfway through the year, turned from a 10 to 15 possession player to about a 20 plus possession player, and he did that with just flying colours. Great half of the season. I hope he gets another year.
Yep. Obviously, he's one of the favourites of the podcast. He was one of our player sponsors this year for Big Footy. You are right, he did have a bit of a poor start to the season. He was averaging only 11 touches a game to the state game. But he did really come good in that second half of the season with a bit more midfield time. I do like him as a midfielder. I think he reads the play exceptionally well at the stoppages. And you could just sense his confidence building as the year went on. He was starting to get more and more of the ball. He was starting to hit those sort of over 20 disposal games. He was taking more marks, kicking some more goals. He had a pretty good final series as well.
You could almost compare it to Ben Newton's 2013, like halfway through the year.
Yeah.
I think he might have got an early injury and he looked to be gone. And in that second half, if we didn't play finals that year, I think he probably would have gotten a game in 2013.
Rick, what do you think,
He
mate?
took a good hanger I just thought he took a good hanger. That's all that mattered. No. Well, look, basically what you guys said, he had Taylor two halves, really, for the season. And I thought, for me, it was most noticeable in the grand final, which I sort of spoke about a little bit. And he really looked like his twitch fibres, so to speak, have really progressed through the year. And he started, his pace of how he was looking to use the ball seemed to be at a faster level than what the SANFL needed. So he seems to be adjusting quite well now. And you pointed out he's 20. Ollie Wines has just turned 20. So third year in the system, but, an extra year, really, than Ollie Wines. But he's still the same age as Ollie Wines. Yeah. So I don't think he has been contracted yet. But I would hope that the club, once the trade period's over, I guess, will make a commitment to at least give him one more year, because I think next year, could be a very good breakout year for Brendan AhChee.
I hope so. I think he's got a lot of talent. As we said, he played a really good game against Sturt at Unley Oval. I also thought his prelim final against South was probably his best game for the year, picking up 24 touches and 2 goals. I think he's got a lot of natural talent. He reads the play super well. He's got a great size for an AFL player. I think at the moment he's probably a bit of a poor man's Andrew Moore, I'd guess you're saying, in terms of playing style. But I think next year, if he does get another contract, if he has a really good pre-season, if he starts the season well, he should be able to push for games.
Yeah, I think late in the year he could get a couple of emergency gigs if he improves at the rate he did in the second half this year. Like Carl Amon I think he was an emergency once. He was it was a reward for what he's done.
Yeah. All right, second player to talk about is Carl Amon. He's 19 years old. It was his first season. He was a late pick in the draft last year. He's another midfielder / forward. He played 19 games as well, kicked 15 goals, averaged just over 16 disposals a game. I thought he was someone that really impressed in his debut season with his skills, his pace and ability to read the play as well.
Definitely a value pick, that's for sure. On the wing, half forward, even as a small forward, he can kick a couple of bags. I think one game he kicked 4 as well.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, that was against South in round 13. He had 21 touches and 4 goals, a super game that day. He was rewarded, as you said, with a couple of emergency spots late in the year. I think against Collingwood was one of them.
Is he contracted?
Oh, yeah.
He'd have 2 years, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Like minimum, this year and next year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he deserves it. He's been great this year.
Yeah.
Very good value pick.
No, I mean, look, he was one of those slender guys that was going to be very lucky, so to speak, I guess, to get an AFL call-up. So to push his way onto the emergency list was a fair accomplishment. And I guess this is where, if we're looking at maybe moving on Ben Newton, this would be one of those, him and AhChee would be one of those type of players that would be hoping to push through and take his second-tier pressure to the AFL level for the first 22 players. So, but a very serviceable first year for Amon, and it will be very interesting to see what he can deliver for us next year.
Look, he was another that I didn't really have many expectations of. I thought, he was pretty small. These sorts of players can sometimes take a couple of years to develop, and he did have quite a slow start to the season. It did take him probably 4 to 6 weeks to really find his niche, but he really did find a good sort of role in that SANFL team as that sort of wingman. He's got fantastic skills, probably just needs to hit the target a little bit more, but with his pace, with his little bit of X factor, he can kick a goal. I think he's definitely got an AFL future.
Yeah, Paul Stewart even said on Twitter that he's really bullish on his potential, that he thinks that he can get a game next year at AFL level.
Yep. I think there's no doubt he's going to get games next year. Once again, he had a very good final series, averaged around 16 touches and a goal a game throughout the final series, so it was good to see him perform on the big stage as well. All right, the next player, one of the big guns, Travis Bokar, super captain. He's 26 years old. It's his second season as captain. He played 24 games, kicked 19 goals, averaged 26 disposals a game. He was our number one player in disposals, inside 50s, contested possessions, second in clearances and fifth in tackles. He finished second in the best and fairest and fifth in the Brownlow. How do we see his year?
Is this time limited, this podcast?
Certainly isn't.
What can you say? Like, what a champion! He's in his prime. I think he's rated like 9th in the AFL on the rating system. It's like, what a champion! What a captain! I think he might be the best captain we've ever had on at AFL level.
Oh, come on, steady on.
Oh, I've made that call a couple of times. I do like that call. I do like
Start
that call.
sounding like Craig. Bloody hell. Fair of his. Let's wait to the end of his career, and then
I'll have no doubt that at the end of his career, it won't even be an argument.
He'll be knighted.
It won't even be an argument that he'll be the best captain.
Well, it could be. But I mean, look, it takes me back to 2012. There were people that, and I wasn't one of them, funny enough, that were also considering his use in the side. Really, I think that was the year he was carrying that foot injury. Is that right, Macca? Or 2000?
Yeah, he was carrying an injury and wasn't really hitting his targets by foot and was struggling a little bit. Yep.
Was it ankle or heel?
I thought it was the inside of his base of his foot, like his plantar fascia or whatever it is.
I think he was out for a month or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, but then even after that, he must have been injured and been playing on painkillers because he was even looking like he was kicking a football like with a numb foot. But he, and then obviously we've had the well spoken that he had that infamous "what am I going to do" moment, and we know what he chose. But to see where he's gone from that low point as an individual player in a low pointed team to where he is now and what he's doing is just a testament to his character as a footballing leader as well as a player to be able to raise his standards. And even though he's getting close to his ceiling, I think he's still got a long way to go in relation to now his consistency. I think he can still up it another level. And it'll be scary if he can actually deliver on that, I would imagine, for a lot of teams.
I will say, though, that back in the dark days, there were comparisons to him and Selwood about, why some people were saying, why didn't we pick Selwood and stuff like that. But you can definitely see now when we're up the top that he's worth he's worth the draft pick, and no one can argue it.
No, absolutely. Here's a question: was he better in 2013 or 2014?
I'd say 13. Same with Wingard, but he didn't. Wingard, he had a good season this year, but it was down in form a lot. But Boak was maybe just a tiny bit down, not much.
See, I reckon it's super close. It's super close. Last year he single-handedly got us over the line with those huge last quarters against Adelaide twice, I think it was, against West Coast, against Collingwood. This year he just dominated games from the get-go, and in big games as well. He had 3 Brownlow votes against Geelong. He had 3 Brownlow votes against Hawthorn. He got 2 against Sydney, 1 against Freo. I mean, that's a good record there, and he was best on ground in our home final against Richmond as well.
And we don't want him to have to carry the team on the back, on his back. It's not healthy. So if he's lifting the players around him to the other level, well, then he's doing his job as captain. And if we're not noticing what he's doing as much, even though he's doing it, again, kudos to him as captain. And I remember the talk about who was better, Luke Hodge or Chris Judd. Now, when you're reflecting on the end of their careers, who will people be arguing is the better draft pick now? So both young players, still a lot of water to go under that bridge in relation to who end up being the better player But
Yep.
both players are fantastic players in their own right.
Mm.
He's just such a great leader. I love Boki. He's just a great player. Pure
Mm.
Port Adelaide, I reckon.
Definitely.
He is. He epitomises what a Port Adelaide captain is. And to me, if I think Port Adelaide and cap, the first thing I think of is selfless. And he's definitely that.
Yep. Look, next cab off the rank is Matty Broadbent, the Cobra. He's 24 years old, played 104 games. This year he played every game. He played 25 games. He averaged just over 18 disposals a game, 4 marks and 3.6 rebounds a game. In fact, he was our best player in terms of rebounds from 50. Most of the season he played as that sort of +1 down back for most of the year. I guess the question, similar to Boki, was he better in 2013 or 2014?
I think he was slightly better this year. I like how he was 30th best in the AFL according to Sheehan,
Yep.
but which was a surprise. But he, in my opinion, his best spot on the ground is mopping up as that +1 in the back pocket, giving the ball off, also with the kickouts as well, giving it to Lobie, giving it to Westhoff, maybe potentially Ryder. I think that's the best spot on the ground. Maybe a little bit in the midfield as well, like in the third quarter or something like that.
I reckon his 2013 was a little bit better. But that's because I think he wasn't respected as much by the opposition and was able to get away with his own game a little bit more. He got a lot more attention this year because
He did.
I think the Brisbane game showed you just can't let him run wild and get 35 possessions and do whatever he wants, because he, with such a penetrating kick and the ability to rebound, as he pointed out, he can do too much damage. And that's where he's forming a great nucleus of a defensive unit there. When you throw in the players like AhChee and Jasper Pittard collectively as a defensive unit, they're going to be very offensive with their ball movements. So, but I mean, he's still developing nicely, and I agree, Ross. I think he's got an ability to be able to, now that his body is mature, to impact in the midfield rotations as well. And I think that happened was it the Hawthorn game?
Yeah, I think near the end, but not right at the end, probably like late third, I'd say.
Yeah.
Spent a bit of time.
Yeah, so he's got that physical body now to be able to go into the midfield and exert some influence there as well, but then come back to the defence and provide that steady head when need be. So, he's taken a while.
He did come third in our best and fairest playing as a pure midfielder in 2012, so he definitely can play that role.
So 2012, that was the breakout year, wasn't it?
That was his breakout year, yeah. I probably thought he was a tiny bit better last year than he was this year. I think he was certainly more consistent last year. I thought he had a brilliant first half of the year, and I can understand why someone like Sheehan would consider him maybe 30th best player in the AFL if he did see his first half of the year. But I actually had him in the All-Australian side halfway through the year, but I thought he did fall away pretty badly once clubs sort of worked out that they need to sort of spend some more attention on him, man him up a little bit. And I thought it took him, probably 3 or 4 weeks to adjust to that after the halfway mark of the season. I think probably my main criticism of him is that he needs to have some better positioning in that defensive 50. I think he gets caught in no man's land a little bit, where he's neither sort of the third man up providing the spoil or the mark, or providing that dash and carry. He sort of gets stuck in between a little bit.
I do notice on the opposition boards leading up to some games that people do mention that Broadbent should get a bit of attention in their forward lines, that he gets tagged a little bit, which I don't really see that happening sometimes. I don't notice it, but he does get the attention.
Do we still see him playing that role, that sort of +1 in defence role next year?
Yep.
Well, I guess who else is going to play it? AhChee. Yeah, Jasper. I guess it depends on how badly we need him in the midfield. I think that we've got his spot covered in the midfield at the moment. So, he could be, if we don't need him as that +1, he could be in a bit of trouble. I guess.
Calhoun does pretty well in that role, but I'm not sure if he'll get as many games early in the year as I think because of his leg.
No. Yeah, it'll probably take him a couple of months to get back into the swing of things, I would think.
Yep.
On to the next player, someone that we could probably spend an entire podcast talking about.
Yep.
Big Johnny Butcher, the future, possibly the past. You never know. He's 22 years old. He's played 23 games as a key position forward. This year, he played the first 3 games at AFL level, kicked 2 goals, took 13 marks, was dropped and wasn't seen again after that. He played 16 games in the SANFL and kicked 32 goals, took 79 marks. What a season it was for Johnny Butcher, full of highs and lows. It was his first full pre-season. He played the first 3 games. He was dropped and he wasn't seen again.
Can I ask you boys a question here?
Mm.
How old's Dan Gorringe?
22.
22.
And how old's John Butcher?
23, I think.
22, I think.
Oh,
Could be
That's
23, actually. Yeah.
How tall's Gorringe? 200 centimetres?
Yep.
about that.
And how tall's Butcher?
197, I think.
197. Yep.
So I guess we know
That's
what his
it.
weaknesses are, but why are some of us as supporters, so critical and scathing and willing to burn him off already, but then at the same time, we're willing to look at someone like Dan Gorringe and go, well, he's still young, still developing, and they take time as a tall player. So, I mean, if we were looking as Butcher as a ruckman, we might be more to give him more time to develop. But because we're looking at him as a forward, we have this unhealthy obsession that he should be kicking 50 goals a season. I don't know, just putting that out there.
I think what it is because he kicked those bags a couple of years ago, that there's been so much hype around him, and because he hasn't reached that potential that we've all thought he would at the moment, he still can. But
But that's not his fault.
Yeah,
It's not his fault that he kicked those goals, and it's not his fault
Oh,
that
it's
he
not.
got
No,
dubbed.
you're right.
And it's not his fault that he's been dubbed the future. It was probably, with hindsight, it was probably a very unfair call to put on him, and probably put more pressure on him than what really needed to be.
yeah. I think if he kicked probably like 1 or 2 goals in those games, there wouldn't be so much hype around him, and there wouldn't be so many disappointed people.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's obviously there's reasons why people think he's been a little bit disappointing. Obviously, his consistency is something that gets talked about. 1 week he'll kick 5 goals, the next week he can't get a kick. Obviously, his skills have been much talked about. Whether he can actually judge his leading and the ball coming in from further upfield correctly is something that's been widely talked about. I don't know. I think we all hold out some real hope for Butcher. We all want him to succeed. He's a great bloke. He's got some great attributes to his game. It's just whether or not he's actually going to ever put them together or not.
Yeah, as it stands, he's got another year on his contract as well. So if he doesn't somehow find a trade, we have to stick with him, and we have to hope that he comes good in the next year as well.
Yeah.
Well, we have to be really clever about what we're trading to, if that was to happen, because I mean we've obviously invested a fair bit in him. So I mean, there's no point trading him for a third or fourth round pick or a bag of peanuts. That's right. Maybe we should go to Essendon and ask for their peanuts. But we're not going to really. What's the benefit of doing that? Nothing. We're better off sticking fat with the guy and really working on his goal kicking and his confidence. I'm probably the biggest criticism I have of John, which also is directed at the club, is he's been in our system so long now that there hasn't been improvement there. And I think that's an indictment both on the player but also the coaches at the footy club, that they haven't been able to develop that. And I don't know if it is just because of his injuries, and surely we're a professional enough organisation that we should have been able to develop some sort of structure and routine to sort of facilitate improvement there, and that just doesn't seem visible as a supporter.
I've heard that this has been denied, but I still think that there's something might be wrong with his hip, which affects his kicking.
I'm not too sure. I mean, his kicking, even in the juniors, was always an issue. He's always been a player that can, 1 week he'll kick 7 goals, the next week he'll kick 2 goals 8. It's always been a problem for John Butcher. I think his ball drop is something that's regressed over the years instead of developed, which is an issue in itself. But look, for me, I think the main issue with his game for me is that there's just no bread and butter with Johnny Butcher. It's either all or nothing. It's either all spectacular. You know, he can kick fantastic goals from the boundary, on the run from the boundary, but
Yep.
get him 15 metres straight in front. And as we saw in that second showdown, sometimes he can't even make the distance from 20 metres out dead in front. So that's a problem in itself as well. Look, he was probably the most disappointing player for this year for me. As I said, you know, he had a full pre-season. Everyone said, just wait till he has a full pre-season, then we can judge him. I said at the end of last year that if he has another poor season, he might find himself out of the AFL system. I don't think we'll delist him, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone comes knocking, we might look to trade him.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess it was a sign. A lot of people were quite shocked that he got dropped in round 3, but I think when you look at the best and fairest votes, he only got one best and fairest vote in round 1, another one in round 2, and nothing in round 3. So I think going by those coaches, obviously he was doing something not quite right.
I will say
level.
that is pretty harsh though. That he only got one vote in that second game. I thought he was actually pretty good.
He was really good in that showdown. I thought. I guess it was all the different things that he was doing. Like he was keeping the ball in front. He wasn't actually taking many marks, but I thought his competitiveness was probably the best we've ever seen it in that showdown, which was great.
And he was very unselfish as well. He gave up a couple.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he kicked 23 goals in 7 games when he went back to the SANFL, but he just couldn't get a look in. Obviously, he struggled through the second half of the season. He got viral meningitis, which knocked him around a little bit. Then he got injured on the verge of the finals. He came back in for the grand final, but just couldn't put it together.
Yep.
So what are the hopes for Johnny Butcher for 2015? Is he ever going to put it together?
Well, at the moment, I'd probably say, unfortunately, I'd have to say no. But you know, he's still got another pre-season to go, and I'm hoping he can turn it around.
My call is he's on the list. He's going to be the most talked up player for 2015 by all the other players. I mean, everyone's going to be talking about, watch out for Johnny Butcher. Johnny Butcher's on fire on the training track. Johnny Butcher's going to deliver. Everyone's going to pump up his tyres for 2015.
Yep.
And
That's
it has to.
call.
2015 has to be his year.
Well, it is. As I said at the end of last year, he could find himself out of the AFL system. By the end of next year, it would have been 6 full seasons in the AFL system. If he doesn't make it next year, I think that's game over for Johnny.
Yep, I agree.
All right, on to the next player. Darcy Byrne-Jones, another debutant this year. He's 19 years old. Was around about a third-round pick from memory. Didn't play a game at AFL level, but was another that played 19 games in the SANFL. Averaged just under 15 disposals a game. He's quite a quick back flanker that can also run through the middle and on the wing. He's one that actually came to play from the start. He had really good form early. His skills and competitiveness can be a little bit of a mixed bag. I think he needs to be switched on for a little bit longer, but he's clearly got a lot of talent.
I think late in the year as well, he almost got 30 possessions in one of those finals. It might have been 27 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually reminds me a little bit of a more attacking version of Pittard as well, just the way he runs around with the ball.
Yep. Yeah, he got 22 touches in the prelim.
Talking about there. A
No,
more
he's a good
attacking
player.
version of Pittard. Come on. He's
Pittard's
not even
a
the same
defender.
sphere as Pittard. Right? You can't even make comparisons like that.
How about an SANFL version?
Rick, just wait for the Jasper Pittard podcast, and we can discuss it.
We're doing a whole review on Jasper, aren't we? Just
yeah,
one
pretty
podcast.
much. The Pittard
Yeah,
cast.
baby.
That would be epic. Would go for 2.5 minutes. Be great.
30 seconds.
Look, I think he's clearly got a lot of talent to work with. I think for him, it's all mental. He just needs to know that he does belong on an AFL list and that he can actually put these sort of consistent performances together. As I said, I think he needs to be switched on for longer. I think there's something that happens with young players. I think, that there's times where they look to be cruising on the park a little bit, and I think that'll improve as time goes on. I really like his pace. I love his tackling. It's just a matter of him hitting those targets with his foot skills as well.
Yeah, for him, I'd say in his sights or his goals, I don't think AFL should be in it. I think a good, 20-plus possession average season in the SANFL should be his goal.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think good quality, consistent SANFL footy, and aim to play from sort of round 1, 2016.
Definitely.
Now one of our favourites, Alipati Carlisle. He had a fantastic year, I thought. He's 27 years old. He plays as our fullback. He's played 153 games. He played 20 games this year. He finished 14th in our best and fairest. I thought he had a very good season.
Yeah, definitely. I'd have to give out a shout out to Burjo. He's turned his career around. He's a very good fullback for us. Some people even thrown up All-Australian as well during the year that he almost should have got in the squad at least.
Mm.
I think we could argue that you're robbing Alipati credit for turning his own career around with the guidance of Burgess.
Exactly. Yep.
It's Alipati's done the hard work. And look, I'm going to use this I word again. It's a bit of an indictment on Alipati. He let himself go back then, but he did. He learnt from his mistakes and he turned it around and he put in a blistering 2014, I thought, and nothing better than his preliminary final against Hawthorn. I thought that game from him was fantastic. He was a general back there, and he kept running the lines, and that was the feature for him all year, his dare to run the lines, and that's a Port Adelaide fullback to me.
What was the injury that he got halfway through the year?
Hamstring, wasn't it?
Yep.
I reckon when he came back, I think he actually came back a few weeks too early, and he really like the way he was running, like you could tell that he was a bit underdone. And I think it's great that he really wanted to come back and slot back into the team.
Yeah, his last 2 seasons, he's definitely become the player that he always looked like becoming as a younger player, sort of around when he was sort of 20, 21 years old. He had a few down years there across the sort of Primus era, but I think we all sort of scratched our head how he got a 4-year deal at the end of the Primus era. But look, he's repaid that faith in spades. I think he had a bloody good year this year. He kept players like Kennedy, Pavlich, Hale, Waite, and Podsiadly to 1 goal. Also kept Pavlich goalless once, as well as Liam Jones and Tom Lee. I think probably the only 2 players he struggled with was Travis Cloke and Jared Ruffhead. Even though I thought he did play a pretty good prelim final, his opponent did kick 6 goals.
Yep.
Yeah, but Ruffy wasn't always an opponent. I mean, he wasn't following him up the ground when Ruffhead was going into the centre line. So
even most of those goals that Ruffhead got, they were like all from in the goal square from like a metre out anyway off the ground.
Yeah.
Or a shank shin kick that just bobbles through.
Yeah. I love when he storms through centre half back and just knocks over a couple of people and kicks it to centre half forward.
That's exactly right. The Port Adelaide line busting fullback that we've all grown up watching over the years and even generations. The courage to take the game on and create run and carry. I mean, no better than the great Roger Delaney used to do in the 80s and 90s.
Channeling Roger, just with more
That's
head.
exactly right. Channeling Roger. That could be another podcast, that one.
All right, the last player for this podcast, the great Dom Cassisi, 31 years old, played 228 games. Obviously, he retired mid-year. He played 13 games this year, finished 22nd in the best and fairest. 13.8 disposals and 3.5 tackles a game. What a fantastic career for Dom Cassisi.
Great servant of the club. And I think mid-year when he did retire, I reckon it was his call. He wanted the players themselves to try and win the premiership, and he didn't want to hold them back. And I think one of my memories of Dom was last year at Amy Stadium against Sydney. He got completely punted in the head. I thought his head fell off. And he just got up straight away and dived on the ball like nothing happened. And just the courage in that man. It's just, I can't believe it.
Yeah. That was probably his best game last year. And look, I thought he had a very good start to the season. I thought his best games came in the first half of the year, where he was really good against the Crows in round 2, really good against Brisbane in round 4, and also backed that up in round 5 against West Coast. Obviously, he slowed down as the season went on. He missed a few games with, I guess, fatigue, and in the end, he retired. His body couldn't keep up anymore, and he's just been such a great player. And he did slow down in recent years, but he was such an important player at his peak, and obviously, he was a former club captain as well.
Definitely.
And he went out like a classy captain. Again, selfless. He made a selfless decision for the footy club and the team, and you can't ask for any more than that. And he played a selfless brand of football for the whole time that he was at the footy club. He could have played an accumulating possession game, and he did at times, but then other times he played that negating, hard-working, stopping style, which we needed him to do when we had the better players in the side. So he did it all, but it was clear that Father Time was catching up with him, and, it happens to all footy players, so there's nothing disrespectful about saying that, but at least he had the grace to be able to call the shots and identify it and go out on his own terms. So you got to respect it.
That's it. I mean, he was a great inside midfielder. He was a clearance king. He was a hard tackler. He always won the hard ball. But as you said, Rick, he could always do a very good defensive job, and no more than in the 2004 grand final, where he went on to Jason Ackermanis in the second half and really shut him out of the game.
I think we can also say with that last game he played, I'm glad that Schultz kicked that winner to send him off the correct way.
No doubt. Absolutely. Well, next week we'll continue our player reviews, have some more trade chat, I guess. Ross, it was fantastic to speak to you again.
Thanks for having me.
Rick, as always, buddy.
The blue swimmer crabs are out there, Macca.
Get into it.
We got 60 on the weekend.
Oh, lovely.
And it over 2 days, mind you, so we didn't breach our limits.
Yep.
And
favourite recipe?
Crab cakes.
Crab cakes.
Mashed potato.
Nice.
Crab, corn, egg, salt, pepper, bit of chili flake. Mix it all up. Then crumb it with breadcrumbs, shallow fry with a bit of butter. Rock on.
Beautiful.
Nice.
Easy.
You made me hungry now. Brilliant.
But I reckon it's better if you're going to do them, get out there before Christmas. After Christmas, they dry up a little bit.
Yep. Good stuff. All right, boys. Until next time.
Have a good one.
Calm Ports.
Carla Power.
Ciao.
Carla Maggie's.
Big boomerang. He was the hero a couple of years ago in Port Adelaide's last showdown win. It's bending. That's an all-time classic.